Hey, groovy people, I'm John. I'm a retired math teacher. Do you guys remember this formula, the quadratic formula? My wife and I went on a vacation with our friends to Costa Rica, and we had a tour guide, a foods tour guy, walking tour in Jaco, Costa Rica, take us around the town. It was cool. We spent the day with him, and he asked me to, after he knew I was doing this, to show how we derive this quadratic formula. So, Josue, this is for you. And for everybody else, I have all of your math needs, second grade all the way through high school, every class, the whole year, every class that's taught from second grade through high school. And I also have it right here at this platform. I'm going to upload this video on this platform and on this platform, so I'm not going to say either one of them. So if you go here, you can subscribe. If you go here, you can follow. And let's go ahead and get going with this quadratic formula. Now, I'm going to assume that you know some math, you guys, because otherwise it would take too long on this. So if I said solve this equation right here, I'm gonna do some prior knowledge. We're gonna access some prior knowledge before we can show you how we got this quadratic formula. So if I said what number times itself equals 16, I know most of you guys are thinking 4 does, but so does -4. Remember, a negative times a negative equals a positive, so we write the answer as plus or minus 4. Sorry, I'm in the sunlight right here. So, and then how did we do that? Well, we ended up square rooting both sides, and whenever you square root an unknown right here, x squared, that's our unknown, then we got to include the plus or minus, because 4 times 4 and -4 times -4 equals 16. So x equals plus or minus 4 because we square rooted both sides. So remember, whenever we square root a variable, then we got to include the plus or minus right there. So let's try another one here. Let's do x squared equals 17. Okay, so x squared equals 17. We do the same thing. I'm just going to square root both sides, but it's just going to be plus or minus the square root of 17. And 17 is not a perfect square like 16 was. 16 was 4 squared, or 4 times 4, or -4 times -4. So we just leave it as the plus or minus the square root of 17. And if you got a decimal, it would be a little bit more than the square root of 16, which is 4. So you'd get like 4.12, something like that. So anyway, so just leave it like that, because that's the exact answer, plus or minus the square root of 17. Okay, let's try something else here. I still have a perfect square equaling this number right here. So I'm going to square root both sides. Just don't forget your plus or minus over there. So when I square root both sides, we have the x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 25, which is 5 right there. So plus or minus 5. So now what I'm going to do is get rid of this minus 1, because I got to get x by itself. So I'm going to go plus 1, plus 1. And remember, there's 2 of them on the other side, both positive 5 and negative 5. So plus or minus 5. So we're going to go x equals 1 plus 5, or x equals 1 minus 5. Remember, plus or minus 5. And since 5 is a whole number, we can combine it with this 1 that we're adding to both sides. So 1 plus 5 is 6, and 1 minus 5 is -4. So our two answers are going to be 6 or -4 right there, okay? All right, okay, so let's keep going, you guys. So if I had something like this, you guys, this one's a little easier because 31 is not a perfect square. We're still going to square root both sides, and we're still going to get plus or minus. So I'm going to go x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 31. So when I do that, I get x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 31. And we're going to go -3 minus 3 right here, and we can't add 3 or with the plus or minus the square root of 31, so we just leave it like that. And typically we write the whole number first, so we don't get it mixed up with, is it inside the radical or outside the radical? So we never write plus or minus the square root of 31 and then -3. We always do the -3 first. So -3 plus or minus the square root of 31 is that answer right there. Okay, all right, now Now, this is how we do the quadratic formula or how we get it, is we solve it by completing the square. I'm going to show you an easy one, and this one is easy because the number in front of x squared, if there's no number there, it's understood to be 1, and we want that. That's required to complete the square. And this is an even number. We want to take half of that number, and then we want to square it. So since this is a 1x squared, I'm going to go ahead and go half of 6. Half of 6 is 3. You're going to see that over there on the side right there. And the reason why I wrote 6 over 2 is because we won't get nice, perfect, even numbers on this, but you'll see why in just a minute why I wrote the 2 over there. But half of 6 is 6 over 2. Half of 6 is 3. And then we square 3, and that's the number we're going to add on here and then add on this side. Remember, whatever we do to an equal sign, we got to do it to this side and this side. So I'm going to square 3, which is 9, and then that's the number we're going to add to both sides right there. So to keep that equation balanced right there, I just added 9, and I got 9 from taking half of that number right there and then squaring that. So that's the number that we add to both sides. Now what happens is we're going to get this is called a perfect squared trinomial because that's a perfect square and that's a perfect square. I don't know if you can see through my paper. It's going to get me a binomial squared, and then over here 27 plus 9 is 36. So this gets me, now we're all set up to do what we just did in the prior problem right here. We have this factors to this right here, x plus 3 squared. If I FOILed out x plus 3 times x plus 3, we'd get x squared plus 6x plus 9. So the opposite of FOILing is factoring. So when I factor this perfect square trinomial, it gets me x plus 3 squared equals 36. Now, I have very detailed instructions. I'll show you at the end where to find them, you guys. I taught them in my algebra class. I'll show you exactly where to find the factoring units and all that stuff to see this. So I'm assuming that we're accessing prior knowledge and you know some of this stuff. So if you're kind of going, yeah, okay, that's cool. So here, now we're going to go square root both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus over there. So I'm going to square root both sides, and I get x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 36, which is just 6. So now I'm going to go minus 3, so it's going to be minus 3 plus 6, and then minus 3 minus 6. And then so when we do that, minus 3 plus 6 is 3. Minus 3 minus 6 is minus 9. So those are our two answers that gets us solving that equation right there. Okay, now this is how we get the quadratic formula. So they're not nice, easy ones like that. That, you know, we want this to be 1, and if it's not 1, then we're going to divide everything by that. We also want to get rid of this number and put it on that side. So let's do that first. I'm going to subtract c from both sides right there, and then we're just completing the square right here. So when I subtract c, and a, b, and c are just numbers, you guys. This could be like 5x squared plus 7x minus 10, something like that. So we add out c, so I'm going to subtract c on both sides, and if this number is not 1, then we make it 1 by dividing everything by a in this case. So now we're going to divide everything by a, and then that gets us this right here. So you can see I divided everything by a, so the a's cancel, and I have x squared plus, and I wrote it as b over ax. I put the x out in front, so here's my number that we're going to take half of in just a minute, equals opposite c over a. Okay, so now half of b over a is, we just put a 2 in the denominator. That's why I wrote that 2 right there. So half of b over a is b over 2a. And then we square this guy, and that's the number that we add to both sides. So when I square b over 2a, b squared is b squared, 2 squared is 4, a squared is a squared. So this is the number that we add to both sides of the equation. Okay, now the next little piece of paper, I'm just going to simplify this, make it a little bit cleaner. I'm going to write this part first and this part second, and then we're going to get a common denominator. The common denominator is 4a squared, so we're going to multiply this one. To get 4a squared, we're going to multiply it by 4a over 4a. Okay, so here we go. So you'll just see I'm just simplifying that stuff over here. You can see I did that. I just took that and took it right there, and then I multiplied this minus c over a times 4a over 4a. That way we get 4a squared right there, and then we have b squared minus 4, and we usually put it in alphabetical order, ac. Kind of starting to look familiar right there. B squared minus 4ac over the common denominator. This now has 4a squared and 4a squared. So over the common denominator. So I just put this over here. Okay, now this is a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so this factors to square root of that is x. Square root of that is just what we took half of, is going to be b over 2a. Square root of b over 2a is what we get here. The quantity squared equals that stuff right there. Okay, so you'll see I have that right there. I kind of lost some of you guys right there. Again, I show you step by step where to find these lessons in order. So we have x plus b over 2a squared. So square root that is that. The square root of that is that. If I FOILed that out and I was very careful, I would get that right there. Okay, and then here's this stuff right here equals that. Okay, now I need some room, so I'm going to just take this part up and put it at the top of the next paper right there. So here's that part right there. Okay, I just took that part right there underneath my hand right there, and then floated it up right there. Okay, so now we square root both sides. So don't forget the plus or minus when we square root both sides, and you'll see what I'm doing right there. So this equals plus or minus the square root of this. Well, when I square root a fraction, you can square root the top and the bottom separately. And the reason why I did that is the square root of 4a squared is just 2a. Okay, so now I have this equals plus or minus that square root right there. So I'm gonna do that right there. Okay, we're almost done, Josue. So I have this equals this equals this. Okay, so now I'm just going to go minus b over 2a minus b over 2a. They already have common denominators, so we can just combine them over the same denominator right there. And bing, bang, boom, there it is right there, the quadratic formula. So negative b, and I usually say opposite b because b might be some negative number. Okay, so here it is, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. They both have the denominator of 2a. That's our quadratic formula. And remember, this came from solving this equation. So whenever you have any quadratic equation, and if you can't factor it, I use the quadratic formula on a last resort, you guys, because I mess up too, and teachers mess up with the negative signs, and if there's fractions involved and all that stuff, this can get kind of messy right here. But this will solve every quadratic equation that equals 0. Quadratic equation means something x squared plus something x plus something. So a, b, and c are just numbers, and you just plug them into that formula, and that'll get you on every one of them, you guys. So if you need some more help on this, you guys, I have some much more detailed help on my website. You can find that link in my bio, mrmathblog.com, and then scroll over to the right, find the Algebra 1 link, and then on the bottom right hand side, it's in green right here, in green, look for sections 10.6 and 10.7. 10.6 is completing the square. 10.7 is doing what we just did right here, okay? All right, you guys, I hope that helps, Josue, and we had a fantastic time with you the other day, so thanks a lot, you guys, and I'll see you later. Peace out.